The stagecoach rattled into Springerville, Arizona on a blistering afternoon in June of 1878, carrying a woman whose arrival would change everything for a man who had spent 32 years believing he would die alone. Isaac Sutton stood on the wooden boardwalk outside the general store, his weathered hands resting on his gun belt as he watched the dust cloud settle around the coach. He was not expecting anyone in particular, but in a town of barely 300 souls, every arrival was an event worth noting. The tall cowboy had lived in Springerville since his father brought him west as a boy of 8, and in all those years, he had watched the town grow from a collection of tents into something resembling civilization. He worked the Sutton Ranch now, the property his father had built with blood and determination, raising cattle across 3,000 acres of high desert grassland. The stagecoach door swung open, and a slender hand appeared, followed by a woman in a traveling dress the color of deep wine. Her dark auburn hair was pinned up beneath a modest hat, and even from 20 feet away, Isaac could see the intelligence in her green eyes as she surveyed her new home with an expression that mixed hope and trepidation in equal measure. "That would be the new schoolteacher," said Walter Green, the postmaster who had positioned himself next to Isaac. "Miss Adelaide Ellis, all the way from Boston. Board of Education hired her after poor Mrs. Henderson passed last winter." Isaac nodded but said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence served him better than empty words. He watched as Adelaide Ellis stepped down from the coach with practiced grace, her boots touching the dusty street with a confidence that surprised him. Most Eastern women arrived in Springerville looking terrified of the untamed land, but this one held her chin high as she looked around at the rough buildings and the mountains rising in the distance. "Someone meeting her?" Isaac asked. "Supposed to be Mrs. Patterson, but I heard the baby was sick this morning. Might be nobody knows she is arriving today." Walter scratched his gray beard thoughtfully. Shame to leave a lady standing in this heat. Isaac felt something shift in his chest, some instinct he could not name. Before he could think better of it, he stepped off the boardwalk and crossed the street, his spurs chinking softly with each stride. Adelaide had retrieved a carpet bag from the coach driver and was looking up and down the street with growing uncertainty. "Miss Ellis." Isaac removed his hat, revealing dark hair that fell nearly to his collar. "I am Isaac Sutton. Welcome to Springerville." Her eyes met his, and Isaac felt the world narrow to just the two of them for a heartbeat. Up close, he could see the freckles scattered across her nose, the way her lips curved naturally upward as though she were accustomed to smiling, the slight crease between her brows that suggested she thought deeply about things. "Mr. Sutton, how did you know my name?" Her voice carried the crisp consonants of New England, but there was warmth there too, a musicality that made him want to hear her speak again. "Small town, madam. Word travels. I believe Mrs. Patterson was meant to meet you, but I heard her baby took ill. I would be happy to escort you to the boarding house if you need assistance." Adelaide studied him for a long moment, and Isaac wondered what she saw. He was tall and lean from years of hard work, his face tanned dark by the sun, his clothes practical and worn. Nothing about him would impress a woman from Boston, he was certain. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Sutton. I confess I was beginning to worry." She smiled then, and Isaac felt it like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "I have 3 trunks as well. I hope that does not inconvenience you." "No inconvenience at all. My wagon is just there." He pointed to where his team of horses waited in the shade. "I will load your things." As Isaac hoisted the heavy trunks onto his wagon bed, he was acutely aware of Adelaide watching him. He wondered if she found him crude, if his calloused hands and sun-weathered face repulsed her refined sensibilities. When he finished securing the last trunk with rope, he helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand steady under her elbow. The boarding house was only 3 streets over, but the ride gave Isaac time to point out the important buildings. The church with its white steeple, the saloon that stayed open too late most nights, the general store where she could purchase anything she might need, the small restaurant run by a Chinese family who had come to work on the railroad and stayed when they fell in love with the high country. "And the school?" Adelaide asked, her eyes bright with interest. "Just past the church. Small building, but it serves well enough. About 40 students when everyone attends, though during planting and harvest, some of the older children stay home to help their families." "I see." Adelaide was quiet for a moment. "And you, Mr. Sutton, do you have children who will attend?" "No, madam. I am not married." He felt her glance at him, but he kept his eyes on the horses. It was a question he had heard 1,000 times in 1,000 variations. In a frontier town where men outnumbered women 3 to 1, where most cowboys married young to secure help with homesteading, his bachelor status was an anomaly that sparked endless speculation. "The boarding house is run by Mrs. Callahan," he continued, steering the conversation away from himself. "She is fair and keeps a good table. You will be comfortable there." Mrs. Callahan, a stout Irish woman with graying red hair and a personality as warm as her bread, greeted Adelaide with enthusiastic embraces and immediately began fussing over her newest boarder. Isaac carried the trunks up to the second-floor room that would serve as Adelaide's home, then took his leave with a polite nod. "Thank you, Mr. Sutton," Adelaide said from the doorway of her room. "You have been very kind to a stranger. Welcome to Springerville, Miss Ellis. I hope you will be happy here." As Isaac drove his wagon back toward the ranch, he tried to dismiss the schoolteacher from his mind. She was educated, refined, from a world he could barely imagine. Women like Adelaide Ellis did not end up with cowboys who smelled of horses and leather, whose hands were better suited to mending fence than holding teacups. He had long ago accepted his solitary life, had built walls around the part of himself that might have hoped for something different. But that night, as he sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the stars emerge over the mountains, Isaac could not stop thinking about the way Adelaide had looked at the landscape, as though she were seeing possibility instead of desolation. Adelaide spent her first week in Springerville preparing the schoolhouse and meeting the families whose children she would teach. The building itself was simple. Rough wooden walls, windows that let in good light, a pot-bellied stove for winter, and 2 rows of benches facing a battered desk and chalkboard. She cleaned every surface, arranged the limited supply of books and slates, and created a list of supplies she would need to purchase with her modest budget. The families she met were varied in their circumstances, but united in their hope that education might give their children opportunities beyond the hard life of the frontier. There were ranchers and farmers, a blacksmith, a seamstress, the Chinese restaurant owners with their 3 bright-eyed daughters, and a dozen others who welcomed her with varying degrees of warmth and skepticism. On the Saturday before school was set to begin, Adelaide walked through town to familiarize herself with the layout. Springerville sat in a high valley surrounded by mountains, the air thin and clear, the landscape a mixture of grassland and pine forest that struck her as both beautiful and alien after the genteel streets of Boston. She had come west partly for adventure, partly to escape the suffocating expectations of her family, who could not understand why she preferred teaching to finding a suitable husband. She was examining the goods in the window of the general store when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Miss Ellis." "Good morning." She turned to find Isaac Sutton standing there, hat in hand, looking somehow larger in the bright sunlight. He wore clean work clothes and his dark hair was still damp, as though he had recently bathed. "Mr. Sutton, how nice to see you again." She meant it. There was something steady and reassuring about the tall cowboy, something that made her feel safe in this strange new place. "I was wondering if you might permit me to show you something," Isaac said, and Adelaide noticed a slight hesitation in his voice, as though he was unaccustomed to making such requests. "There is a place about a mile from town, a meadow with a creek running through it. It is a good spot for gathering wildflowers, and I thought perhaps you might enjoy having some for your schoolhouse. That is, if you have the time and are not opposed to the idea." Adelaide felt a smile bloom across her face. "That sounds lovely. I would very much enjoy that." They walked at first in companionable silence, following a well-worn path that led north from town. Isaac moved with the easy grace of someone completely at home in the landscape, and Adelaide found herself studying him from the corner of her eye. He was handsome in a rugged way that her Boston friends would have found shocking, all lean muscle and sun-bronzed skin, but there was a gentleness in the way he pointed out a hawk circling overhead, a thoughtfulness in the way he shortened his stride to match hers. "How long have you lived in Springerville?" Adelaide asked as they crossed a low rise and descended into a valley where a creek sparkled in the sun. 24 years. My father brought me and my mother here in '54, when I was 8 years old. He wanted to build something that would last, something we could pass down. He succeeded. The ranch has 200 head of cattle now, good grazing land, and a house built from pine logs we cut ourselves. It sounds like he was a remarkable man. He was. Isaac's voice softened. He died 5 years ago. A horse threw him and he struck his head. It was quick, at least. My mother followed him 2 years later. I think she died of missing him, mostly. I am so sorry." Adelaide touched his arm briefly, a gesture of comfort that felt natural despite their short acquaintance. "It must be lonely, running the ranch by yourself. I have ranch hands, good men who work hard, but yes, it can be lonely." He paused, then seemed to decide something. "I do not mind it most of the time. I have the work, the land, the animals. It is enough." But Adelaide heard what he did not say, the suggestion that perhaps it was not quite enough, that there was something missing even if he had learned to live with the absence. They reached the meadow, and Adelaide gasped with genuine delight. The grass grew knee-high, interspersed with wildflowers in shades of yellow, purple, and white. The creek bubbled along the eastern edge, its water clear and cold from mountain snowmelt. Pine trees surrounded the meadow, their scent sharp and clean in the warm air. "This is beautiful," Adelaide said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "Thank you for bringing me here. You are welcome." Isaac pulled a folded cloth from his pocket. "I brought this for carrying flowers if you want to pick some." They spent the next hour wandering through the meadow, Adelaide gathering flowers, while Isaac told her about the landscape, pointing out useful plants and warning her about the ones to avoid. He spoke about the rhythm of the seasons here, how winter could be harsh but beautiful, how spring arrived late but transformed everything overnight, how summer thunderstorms rolled through the mountains with dramatic fury, how autumn painted the aspens gold. Adelaide found herself fascinated not just by the information, but by the way Isaac shared it. He was not a garrulous man, but when he spoke about the land, passion animated his words. She learned that he knew the location of every spring and stream within 20 miles, could read weather in the behavior of animals, could track a lost cow across bare rock. "You love this place," she said as they sat beside the creek, her bundle of flowers resting between them. "I do." Isaac picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his fingers. "I know it seems harsh to people from back east. The winters are cold, The summers can be brutally hot, and we are always one drought or one hard freeze away from losing everything. But there is a freedom here, a sense that we are building something new. Every person in Springerville came here because they wanted a different life, because they believed they could make something better. That matters. It does matter. Adelaide pulled off her shoes and dangled her feet in the cold creek water, not caring that it was unladylike. I came here for similar reasons. In Boston, my life was mapped out before me. I was supposed to marry a suitable young man, run his household, raise his children, and never have a thought that he did not approve of. Teaching was acceptable only until I secured a husband. But I wanted more. I wanted to use my mind, to do something that mattered, to choose my own path. That took courage, Isaac said quietly, leaving everything familiar, or foolishness. My family thinks I have lost my senses. She glanced at him, suddenly feeling vulnerable. Do you think I am foolish? A Boston woman playing at frontier life until reality becomes too difficult. Isaac met her gaze, his blue eyes serious. No, I think you are brave, and I think Springerville is lucky to have you. Something passed between them in that moment, something that made Adelaide's heart beat faster. She looked away first, focusing on the water rushing over her feet, trying to steady the sudden flutter in her chest. They walked back to town as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Isaac carried her bundle of flowers and Adelaide carried something else, the beginning of a feeling she had not expected to find in Arizona, a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat. School began on Monday morning with 28 students ranging in age from 5 to 15. Adelaide threw herself into teaching with fierce determination, rising before dawn to prepare lessons, staying late to help struggling students, filling the small schoolhouse with the sound of recitations and the scratch of chalk on slate. She loved the work, loved watching understanding bloom on young faces, loved the challenge of reaching children with vastly different backgrounds and abilities. She saw Isaac only occasionally over the next few weeks. He came to town every Saturday for supplies, and they would exchange greetings if they happened to cross paths. He attended church on Sundays, sitting alone in a back pew, his head bowed during prayers. Adelaide found herself watching for him, noticing the way other women in town looked at him with interest that he seemed to deflect with polite distance. It was Mrs. Callahan who, over supper one evening in late July, finally addressed what Adelaide had been wondering. "You have been curious about our Mr. Sutton," the landlady said, passing a bowl of potatoes. "I can see it in the way you watch him at church." Adelaide felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I was not aware I was being so obvious. Only to someone who has been watching you watch him, Mrs. Callahan's eyes twinkled. "He is a good man, though he keeps to himself, has for years. Why has he never married?" The question was out before Adelaide could stop it. Surely in a place where women are scarce, someone must have shown interest. "Oh, plenty have shown interest, dear." Isaac Sutton could have had his pick of the unmarried women in 3 counties. But he always said no, always kept his distance. My late husband once asked him about it, must be 6 or 7 years ago now. Isaac said he was waiting for something, though he could not explain what. Some of the ladies think he is too particular, others that he is simply content alone. But I have always thought he was waiting for the right person, someone who matched him in the ways that matter. Adelaide turned this information over in her mind long after supper ended. She tried to focus on her lesson plans, but her thoughts kept drifting to the quiet cowboy who had shown her the meadow, who spoke of the land with such love, who looked at her sometimes with an expression she could not quite read. The answer to her wondering came on a Saturday afternoon in early August, when a commotion outside drew Adelaide from her room at the boarding house. She reached the street to find a crowd gathered around a wagon where a man lay bleeding from a gash on his head. Isaac knelt beside the injured man, pressing a cloth to the wound while speaking in a low, calm voice. "What happened?" Adelaide asked Mrs. Patterson, who stood nearby with her baby on her hip. "Horse spooked and threw him. Kicked him too by the look of it. Someone has gone for the doctor, but he is out at the Miller place, will not be back for hours." Without thinking, Adelaide pushed through the crowd and dropped to her knees beside Isaac. "I have some medical training," she said quickly. "My father was a doctor in Boston. I used to assist him. Let me help." Isaac looked at her for a moment, then nodded and shifted to give her better access to the injured man. Adelaide examined the wound with practiced efficiency, noting that it was long but not deep, that the skull beneath seemed intact. The man's eyes were unfocused, but he responded to questions, which she took as a good sign. "We need to get him somewhere clean where I can stitch this properly," Adelaide said. "The boarding house is closest. Mr. Sutton, can you carry him?" "Yes." Isaac scooped the man up as though he weighed nothing and followed Adelaide back to Mrs. Callahan's, taking the stairs carefully to avoid jarring his burden. They laid the injured man on Adelaide's bed, and she sent Mrs. Callahan running for her medical supplies while she cleaned the wound with water and whiskey. Isaac stayed, following Adelaide's instructions without question. He held the man still when Adelaide stitched the gash closed with neat, precise movements. He helped her bind the wound with clean cloth. He spoke reassuringly to the injured man, whose name was Thomas Wright, about his wife and children and how he would be fine. When it was done, and Thomas was resting comfortably, Adelaide walked with Isaac out to the porch, her hand still trembling slightly from the rush of crisis and action. "Thank you for your help," she said, looking up at him. "You were very steady. You were the one who knew what to do. Where did you learn to stitch like that? My father used to say that all knowledge was useful, even for a woman. He let me study with him despite my mother's objections. I never thought I would need those skills, but I am glad I have them." Isaac leaned against the porch railing, his expression thoughtful. "You are full of surprises, Miss Ellis." "Adelaide," she said impulsively. "Please call me Adelaide. Miss Ellis sounds so formal." "Adelaide." He said her name carefully, as though testing the shape of it. "Then you should call me Isaac." "Isaac." She liked the way it felt in her mouth, solid and strong like the man himself. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. Adelaide was acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the way his presence made her feel both excited and calm at the same time. "There is a dance next Saturday," Isaac said suddenly, not quite meeting her eyes. "The town holds one every month during summer. I was wondering if you might allow me to escort you." Adelaide felt her heart lift. "I would like that very much. I should warn you, I am not a particularly good dancer. Neither am I. We shall muddle through together." Isaac smiled then, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something that made Adelaide's breath catch. "Next Saturday, then. I will call for you at 7. The week passed with agonizing slowness. Adelaide found herself distracted during lessons, her mind wandering to thoughts of the upcoming dance. She consulted with Mrs. Callahan and the other ladies at the boarding house about what to wear, finally settling on a dress of deep blue that brought out the green in her eyes. She felt silly for caring so much, but she could not help it. Something about Isaac Sutton had gotten under her skin, into her thoughts, and she wanted him to see her as more than just the schoolteacher from Boston. Saturday arrived at last, bright and warm. Adelaide spent the afternoon helping Mrs. Callahan prepare food for the dance, which was being held in the largest barn in town, one that belonged to a rancher named Peterson. By the time Isaac knocked on the boarding house door at 7, Adelaide's hands were shaking as she tied her bonnet. He looked different, dressed in clean, pressed clothes with his dark hair neatly combed. He held a small bouquet of wildflowers, the same kind they had picked in the meadow. "These are for you," he said, handing them to her with an expression that was almost shy. "They are beautiful. Thank you." Adelaide breathed in their sweet scent, touched by the gesture. "Let me put them in water and then we can go." The walk to the Peterson barn took 20 minutes, and Adelaide learned more about Isaac with every step. He told her about his childhood, about learning to ride and rope from his father, about the year the drought almost destroyed them, about the careful rebuilding that followed. He asked her about Boston, about her family, about the books she loved and the dreams she carried. By the time they reached the barn, Adelaide felt as though she had known Isaac for years instead of weeks. There was an ease between them, a natural rhythm to their conversation that made everything else fall away. The barn had been transformed with lanterns and bunting, the floor swept clean for dancing. A small group of musicians sat in one corner with fiddles and a guitar, playing lively tunes that had people clapping and stamping their feet. Long tables held food and drinks, and everywhere Adelaide looked, she saw people laughing and talking, the hard edges of frontier life softened by community and celebration. Isaac introduced her to people she had not yet met, his hand steady on the small of her back as they navigated through the crowd. She met his ranch hands, grizzled cowboys who teased Isaac mercilessly about finally bringing a woman to the dance. She met the town council members, who expressed approval of her work at the school. She met families whose children sat in her classroom every day, who thanked her for her patience and dedication. When the music shifted to a waltz, Isaac turned to her with a questioning look. "Would you like to dance?" "Yes." He led her onto the floor and placed one hand on her waist, taking her other hand in his. They moved together awkwardly at first, both of them clearly out of practice, but Adelaide found that she did not care about technique. What mattered was the way Isaac looked at her, the warmth of his hand on her waist, the feeling that nothing else existed beyond the two of them and the music. "I am glad you came to Springerville," Isaac said quietly as they turned in slow circles. "So am I," Adelaide whispered back, and meant it with her whole heart. They danced 3 more times that night, and between dances, they talked and laughed and shared food from the tables. Adelaide met more townspeople, felt the community embracing her as one of their own. But mostly she was aware of Isaac beside her, the way his eyes sought hers across the room, the way he smiled when she said something that amused him. As the evening wound down and people began drifting toward their homes, Isaac walked Adelaide back to the boarding house. The night was clear and cool, the stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," Adelaide said when they reached Mrs. Callahan's porch. "Would you like to come out to the ranch tomorrow after church?" Isaac asked, the words tumbling out quickly as though he feared he might lose his courage. "I could show you around, and my cook makes a fine Sunday dinner. That is, if you are not opposed to spending more time with me. I would love to see your ranch." Adelaide felt bold in the darkness. "And I am not at all opposed to spending time with you, Isaac. In fact, I find myself hoping to spend a great deal more time with you." Isaac stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek with surprising gentleness. "Adelaide, I need to tell you something. I need you to understand." "What is it?" People have asked me for years why I never married, why I turned down every woman who showed interest. The truth is, I was waiting. I did not know what for until the day you stepped off that stagecoach. But when I saw you, when I talked to you, I knew. I was waiting for you. Adelaide's breath caught in her throat. The words were simple but carried a weight that made her heart race. You cannot possibly know that after such a short time. Maybe not. But I know what I feel, and I know I have never felt it before. I am not asking you for promises or commitments. I am just asking if you might be willing to see where this leads, if you might feel even a fraction of what I feel when I look at you. Adelaide reached up and covered his hand with hers, pressing it against her cheek. I do feel it, Isaac. I feel it so much it frightens me. I came here to be independent, to build a life on my own terms, and now I find myself falling for a cowboy who looks at me like I am something precious. You are precious. Isaac leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers. You are the answer to every prayer I was afraid to say out loud. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing in sync, the night quiet around them. When Isaac finally pulled back, Adelaide felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. Tomorrow after church, he said softly, I will be waiting. I will be there. Adelaide floated up to her room, her mind spinning, her heart full. She had come to Arizona expecting adventure, expecting to build a new life, but she had not expected this. The overwhelming feeling of having found something she did not know she was looking for, of having come home to a place she had never been. Sunday dawned bright and beautiful. Adelaide dressed carefully in her best day dress and sat through the church service, barely hearing a word the preacher said. She was too aware of Isaac sitting 3 rows back, too excited about the afternoon ahead. When the service ended, Isaac met her outside the church with his wagon. The drive to the ranch took them east of town, following a road that climbed through grassland dotted with cattle. The ranch house appeared after 20 minutes, a solid structure of pine logs with a wide porch and windows that caught the morning light. It is wonderful, Adelaide said as Isaac helped her down from the wagon. You and your father built this, with help from neighbors. That is how it works out here. Everyone pitches in when something big needs doing. He led her up to the porch. Come on, I will show you around. The inside of the house was simpler than Adelaide expected, but comfortable. A large main room served as kitchen and living space, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. 3 bedrooms branched off the main room, and everything was neat and well maintained. It was clearly a bachelor's home, lacking the soft touches a woman might add, but Adelaide could see the potential, could imagine curtains on the windows and flowers on the table. Isaac's cook, a Mexican man named Miguel who had worked for the Sutton family for 15 years, had prepared a feast: roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from the garden. They ate on the porch, looking out at the land that stretched to the mountains, and Adelaide peppered Isaac with questions about ranch life, about the cattle business, about his plans for the future. I want to expand, Isaac told her, leaning back in his chair. There is good grazing land to the north that might be for sale soon. If I could acquire it, I could double my herd in 5 years. But it would mean taking on debt, taking a risk. My father was a cautious man, and it served him well. I am not sure if I have the same caution in me. Risk is part of progress, Adelaide said thoughtfully. If you never risk anything, you never gain anything either, but the risk should be calculated, not reckless. Do you have a solid plan? I do. I have been working on it for months, running numbers, talking to buyers. I just have not had the courage to act on it. Then perhaps you need someone to believe in you. Adelaide reached across the table and took his hand. For what it is worth, I believe you will succeed at whatever you set your mind to. You are too dedicated, too hardworking to fail. Isaac looked at their joined hands, then back up at her face. Would you like to see more of the property? I could saddle a couple of horses, show you the places I love most. Adelaide had limited riding experience, but she refused to let that stop her. Isaac saddled a gentle mare for her, and gave her patient instruction. And soon they were riding across the grassland, the horses moving at an easy pace. Isaac pointed out landmarks, showed her the spring that provided water year-round, took her to a high point where they could see for miles in every direction. "This is my favorite spot," he said as they sat on a flat rock, the horses grazing nearby. "I come here when I need to think, when I need to remember why I work so hard. I can see why." Adelaide turned slowly, taking in the vast sweep of land and sky. "It makes you feel small and significant at the same time. Small because of the scale of everything, significant because you are part of it, building something that will outlast you." "Exactly." Isaac moved closer to her on the rock. "Most people do not understand that. They see the hard work and the isolation and wonder why anyone would choose this life. But they do not see the beauty, the satisfaction of building something with your own hands." "I see it," Adelaide said softly. "I see it because you have shown it to me." Isaac turned to her, his blue eyes intense. "Adelaide, I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other for 6 weeks. But I need you to know that I am serious about you, about us. I am not the kind of man who plays games or says things he does not mean. When I told you I was waiting for you, I meant it. I want to court you properly, with the intention of making you my wife if you will have me." Adelaide's heart hammered against her ribs. Everything was happening so quickly, and yet it felt completely right, as though they were simply acknowledging something that had been inevitable from the moment they met. "I want that too," she whispered. "I want all of it. But Isaac, I need to keep teaching. It is not just a job to me, it is who I am. I need to know you can accept that. I would never ask you to give up something that matters to you. If anything, I admire your dedication to those children. They are lucky to have you." He took both her hands in his. "We can figure out the logistics. The ranch is close enough to town that you could ride in each morning, or I could drive you. Whatever you need, we will make it work. You make it sound so simple. Because it is simple. I love you, Adelaide. I think I have loved you since the moment you stepped off that stagecoach looking brave and terrified and determined all at once. And I think you might love me too, even if it is too soon to say it out loud." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. "It is not too soon. I do love you, Isaac. I love your steadiness and your passion for this land. I love the way you speak carefully because you want your words to matter. I love the way you look at me like I am the only person in the world who exists. I came here to find myself, and instead I found you." Isaac pulled her close and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Adelaide kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck, her heart soaring. Everything else fell away. The strangeness of the landscape, the uncertainty of frontier life, the fears about moving too fast. All that mattered was this moment, this man, this overwhelming feeling of rightness. They spent the rest of the afternoon on the ranch, walking and talking and stealing kisses when Miguel was not looking. Adelaide met the ranch hands properly. 3 cowboys who clearly adored Isaac and welcomed her with shy smiles and kind words. She saw the barn and the corrals, the garden where Miguel grew vegetables, the chicken coop that provided fresh eggs. She saw the life she could have here, the future that was suddenly bright and clear before her. As the sun began its descent, Isaac drove her back to town. At the boarding house, he kissed her goodbye with reluctance, extracting a promise that she would have dinner with him the following Saturday. The weeks that followed settled into a pattern. Adelaide taught school during the week, pouring her energy into her students. On Saturdays, Isaac came to town and they would spend the day together, sometimes just walking and talking, sometimes joining in community events. On Sundays after church, Adelaide would go to the ranch, and they would spend long afternoons exploring the property, making plans for the future, falling deeper in love with every passing hour. The town watched their courtship with approval. Mrs. Callahan acted as a proud chaperone, beaming every time Isaac collected Adelaide from the boarding house. The other townspeople, who had watched Isaac remain resolutely single for years, seemed delighted that he had finally found someone. Adelaide received knowing smiles from the mothers whose children she taught, friendly advice from the married women about life on a ranch, and cheerful teasing from the younger ladies who admitted they had all harbored secret crushes on the handsome cowboy. In September, as the aspen trees began turning gold in the mountains, Isaac rode into town on a Wednesday evening, unusual because he typically only came on weekends. He found Adelaide just finishing the day's lessons and waited patiently while she dismissed her students and tidied the schoolhouse. "This is a surprise," Adelaide said, unable to keep the smile from her face. "Not that I am complaining. I needed to see you." Isaac removed his hat and turned it in his hands, a gesture Adelaide had learned meant he was nervous. "I have something to ask you, and I could not wait until Saturday." Adelaide's heart began to race. "What is it? Walk with me." They left the schoolhouse and headed toward the creek that ran along the east side of town. The evening was cool and pleasant, the light slanting golden across the grass. Isaac took her hand as they walked, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I filed the paperwork to buy the northern grazing land," he said as they reached the creek bank. "It went through. I own 3,000 more acres as of yesterday, which means I can expand the herd like I planned. It is exciting and terrifying at the same time." "That is wonderful, Isaac. I am so proud of you. I could not have done it without you. Your belief in me gave me the courage to take the risk." He stopped walking and turned to face her, still holding her hand. "Adelaide, you have changed everything for me. Before you came, I was just going through motions, working the ranch because it was what I knew, not because I had any real hope for the future. But now I have hope. Now I have dreams that go beyond just surviving. Isaac, please let me finish." He took a deep breath. "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You are brilliant and brave and beautiful, and every moment I spend with you makes me grateful that I waited, that I did not settle for something less than what we have. I want to build a life with you, Adelaide. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to support your teaching and raise children with you and grow old watching the seasons change over this land. So I am asking you, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and the other half of my soul?" Adelaide felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. "Yes, yes, of course yes. There is nothing I want more than to marry you, to build that life with you." Isaac pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small sapphire that caught the evening light. "This was my grandmother's. She left it to me before she died, told me to give it to a woman who was worth waiting for. I think she would have loved you." Adelaide held out her trembling hand and Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Adelaide kissed him back with all the love and joy and hope that filled her heart. "When?" Isaac murmured against her lips. "When can we get married?" "As soon as you want. I do not need a big ceremony or months of planning, I just need you. A month from now, that will give people time to prepare and we can get the ranch house ready for you. A month is perfect." They walked back to town as darkness fell, making plans and dreaming out loud. They would marry in the church with the whole town invited. Adelaide would continue teaching, commuting from the ranch each day. They would add onto the house as they needed, build a life piece by piece. When Isaac left her at the boarding house that night, Adelaide raced upstairs to share the news with Mrs. Callahan and the other boarders. The celebration that erupted involved tears and laughter and excited chatter that lasted well past midnight. Adelaide finally collapsed into bed, her ring catching the moonlight through the window, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The next 4 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. The women of Springerville rallied around Adelaide, helping her sew a wedding dress, planning a celebration supper, offering advice about ranch life and marriage. Isaac worked frantically to prepare the house, building additional furniture, repairing anything that needed attention, consulting with Adelaide about what changes she wanted. Miguel, thrilled to have a woman joining the household at last, cleaned and organized with military precision. Adelaide wrote to her family in Boston, informing them of her engagement. She received a terse reply from her father expressing disappointment that she had not consulted them, but also a grudging admission that if she was determined to marry a cowboy, at least she seemed happy. Her mother sent a package containing the lace veil she had worn at her own wedding, a gesture that moved Adelaide to tears despite their strained relationship. The school children, delighted by the romance unfolding in their midst, peppered Adelaide with questions and volunteered to pick wildflowers for the ceremony. The older girls braided ribbons for Adelaide's bouquet, and the boys practiced standing still for long periods so they could serve as ushers during the service. Finally, the wedding day arrived. It was the first Saturday in October, the air crisp and cool, the sky a brilliant blue. Adelaide woke early in the boarding house, her stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. Mrs. Callahan and the other ladies helped her dress, fastening the buttons of her white gown, arranging the lace veil, tucking wildflowers into her hair. "You look beautiful, dear, Mrs. Callahan said, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Isaac is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Adelaide replied, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back looked radiant, her green eyes bright with happiness, her face glowing with anticipation. The church was packed when Adelaide arrived on the arm of Walter Green, the postmaster, who had agreed to give her away. Every pew was filled with townspeople dressed in their best clothes, all of them smiling as Adelaide made her way down the aisle. But Adelaide only had eyes for the man waiting at the altar. Isaac stood tall and straight in a new black suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his face transformed by a smile of pure joy. As Adelaide reached him and took his hand, she felt the rightness of this moment settle into her bones. This was where she was meant to be, with this man in this place, building this life. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about the challenges and rewards of building a life together on the frontier. Isaac and Adelaide exchanged vows in clear, steady voices, promising to honor and cherish each other through whatever came. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed Adelaide with such tenderness that several women in the congregation began to cry. The celebration that followed was held in the same barn where Adelaide had attended her first dance. Long tables groaned under the weight of food brought by every family in town. The musicians played cheerful songs and people danced with abandon. Adelaide and Isaac were surrounded by well-wishers, receiving hugs and handshakes and countless toasts to their happiness. As evening approached, Isaac pulled Adelaide aside. "Are you ready to go home, Mrs. Sutton?" Adelaide loved the sound of her new name. "Yes, let us go home." They said their goodbyes and climbed into Isaac's wagon, which had been decorated with ribbons and flowers by enthusiastic children. The drive to the ranch took on a different quality now that Adelaide knew she was going home, that this was the beginning of her new life. The ranch house glowed with lamplight as they approached. Miguel had prepared a simple supper and then made himself scarce, leaving the newlyweds to their privacy. Isaac carried Adelaide over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition, and set her down gently in the main room. "Welcome home," he said softly, cupping her face in his hands. "Home," Adelaide repeated, savoring the word. "I like the sound of that." They ate supper together, talking and laughing, the nervousness of the day giving way to comfortable intimacy. Isaac told Adelaide about improvements he planned for the ranch, and she shared ideas for organizing the house, for creating a space that was truly theirs. When the meal was finished, Isaac took Adelaide's hand and led her to the bedroom he had prepared with such care. What followed was tender and sweet, two people learning each other, discovering the joy of physical intimacy grounded in deep emotional connection. Adelaide had been nervous, but Isaac was patient and gentle, always attuned to her comfort, making her feel cherished and safe. They came together with passion tempered by love, and Adelaide understood in a profound way that this was right, that she belonged here with this man who had waited his whole life for her. Afterward they lay tangled together in the darkness, Adelaide's head on Isaac's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. "Are you happy?" Isaac asked, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. "Happier than I ever imagined being," Adelaide replied honestly. "I feel like my life truly began the day I arrived in Springerville. Mine too." Isaac pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I love you, Adelaide Sutton. I love you too." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in the knowledge that they had found what they were meant to find, that the wait had been worth it because it had led them to this moment, to this perfect beginning. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Adelaide had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, the early rising and the hard work, the way weather and seasons dictated every decision. Isaac had to learn to share his space, to consider another person in his plans, to communicate instead of retreating into solitary silence. But they worked through the adjustments together, always coming back to the love that anchored them. Adelaide continued teaching, riding into town each morning on the gentle mare Isaac had given her as a wedding gift. She loved her students, loved seeing their progress, loved knowing she was making a difference. The ride to and from the ranch gave her time to think, to plan lessons, to appreciate the landscape that was becoming increasingly familiar. At home, Adelaide threw herself into making the house a true home. She sewed curtains for the windows and cushions for the chairs. She planted a flower garden near the front porch. She worked with Miguel in the kitchen, learning to cook the foods Isaac loved while teaching Miguel some of the recipes she had brought from Boston. The Mexican cook became a dear friend, his dry humor and steady presence a comfort during the long days when Isaac was out working the ranch. Isaac was attentive and loving, always making Adelaide feel valued and cherished. He consulted her about decisions, valued her opinions, treated her as a true partner. He came home tired most evenings, smelling of horses and leather and the outdoors, but he always made time to sit with Adelaide on the porch, to share the events of their days, to simply be together. As autumn deepened into winter, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. The realization came gradually. The nausea that struck every morning, the exhaustion that plagued her afternoons, the changes in her body that she recognized from her father's medical books. She waited until she was certain before telling Isaac, choosing a quiet evening in November when they sat together by the fire. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand. "You are going to be a father." Isaac's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and finally pure joy. "Truly, we are having a baby." "Yes, I think it will be born in late June or early July." Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her with a gentleness that made tears spring to Adelaide's eyes. "This is the best news you could have given me. A baby, our baby. Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. "I am overwhelmed, terrified, and more grateful than words can express." He pulled back to look at her face. "Are you happy? I know this will make teaching more difficult." "I am thrilled, and I will teach as long as I can, then take time off after the baby comes. We will figure it out, just like we figure everything else out." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter. Adelaide continued teaching until March, when her expanding belly made the daily ride too uncomfortable. The town board, supportive of their beloved teacher, hired a temporary replacement with the understanding that Adelaide would return after the baby was old enough to leave for the day. Isaac became increasingly protective as Adelaide's due date approached. He hovered, worried about her every move, drove the ranch hands crazy with his distraction. Adelaide found it endearing and exasperating in equal measure, but she understood the fear beneath his concern. Childbirth on the frontier was dangerous, and everyone knew someone who had lost a wife or a child in the process. "I will be fine," Adelaide reassured him repeatedly. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Dr. Morrison is excellent, and Mrs. Callahan has delivered dozens of babies. I am strong and healthy. We will be fine." But as the summer heat descended and Adelaide grew more uncomfortable, she had her own private fears. She did not voice them to Isaac, not wanting to increase his worry, but at night she sometimes lay awake wondering if she would survive the ordeal ahead, wondering if her baby would be healthy, wondering if she was truly strong enough for this frontier life. The labor began on a hot July evening when the sun hung low over the mountains, painting everything gold and orange. Adelaide was sitting on the porch with Isaac when the first contraction hit, a tightening across her belly that made her gasp. Isaac went white and jumped to his feet. "Is it time?" "Should I get the doctor?" "Not yet. It has just started. First babies take a while." Adelaide tried to sound calm despite the flutter of nerves in her chest. "But yes, send Miguel for Mrs. Callahan and Dr. Morrison. I would like them here." The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Mrs. Callahan arrived first, taking charge with the competence of experience, getting Adelaide into bed and preparing supplies. Dr. Morrison came soon after, his presence reassuring. Isaac hovered uselessly until Mrs. Callahan banished him from the bedroom, telling him he was making Adelaide nervous. The labor was long and difficult, stretching through the night and into the next morning. Adelaide had never experienced pain like this, waves of agony that seemed to tear her apart from the inside. But she focused on Mrs. Callahan's steady voice, on Dr. Morrison's calm instructions, on the knowledge that Isaac was just beyond the door, waiting and worrying. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, Adelaide felt an overwhelming urge to push. She bore down with all her strength, crying out with the effort, vaguely aware of Mrs. Callahan and Dr. Morrison encouraging her, and then, suddenly, blessedly, there was relief and the sound of a baby crying. "It is a girl," Dr. Morrison announced, holding up a red, squalling infant. "A perfect, healthy baby girl." Adelaide collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Callahan cleaned the baby quickly and placed her on Adelaide's chest, and Adelaide looked down at her daughter with overwhelming love. The baby was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to already be focusing on her mother's face. "Let me get your husband, Mrs. Callahan said softly, slipping from the room. A moment later Isaac burst through the door, his face haggard from worry. When he saw Adelaide holding the baby, alive and well, his expression crumbled into relief and joy. He approached the bed slowly, as though afraid he might disturb something precious. "Meet your daughter," Adelaide whispered, shifting so Isaac could see the baby's face. Isaac reached out with one finger and stroked the baby's cheek with infinite gentleness. "She is perfect. You are perfect. I cannot believe you did this, that you gave me this gift. We made her together." Adelaide was crying again, but these were happy tears. What should we name her? They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their daughter, Isaac said softly, "Rose, I would like to name her Rose after my mother, if you agree. Rose Sutton." Adelaide tested the name and smiled. "It is perfect. Hello, little Rose. Welcome to the world." Over the next weeks, Adelaide recovered while learning the demanding rhythms of caring for an infant. Rose was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches, but the constant attention required was exhausting. Adelaide had new appreciation for every mother she had ever known, for the sheer, relentless work of keeping a tiny human alive and thriving. Isaac was a devoted father, taking Rose whenever Adelaide needed a break, walking the floor with her when she fussed, staring at her with an expression of awe when she slept. Miguel, declaring himself the baby's honorary grandfather, doted on Rose shamelessly, singing to her in Spanish and making her tiny toys from scraps of wood. As summer faded into autumn, Adelaide began preparing to return to teaching. She had missed her students, missed the satisfaction of the work, and the family needed her income now that they had a baby to support. They hired a local woman, a widow named Mrs. Fletcher, to care for Rose during the days Adelaide taught. It broke Adelaide's heart a little to leave her daughter, but she knew it was necessary, and Mrs. Fletcher was kind and experienced. The routine they established worked well. Adelaide taught Monday through Friday, racing home each afternoon to nurse Rose and spend time with her before supper. On weekends, the family stayed close to the ranch, enjoying quiet time together. Isaac's business prospered as he expanded the herd across his new grazing land. Money was never abundant, but they had enough, and more importantly, they had each other. Rose grew from an infant into a toddler, then into a bright, curious little girl who adored her father and charmed everyone she met. Adelaide watched her daughter explore the ranch with fearless enthusiasm, climbing fences and chasing chickens and demanding to be lifted onto the horses. Rose was pure joy, a constant reminder of the love that had created her. When Rose was 3, Adelaide became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, perhaps because chasing after a toddler kept her too busy to worry. The second baby, a boy they named James after Isaac's father, arrived in the spring of 1882 with considerably less drama than his sister's birth. James was a placid, easy baby who seemed content to observe the world with his father's serious blue eyes. The years flowed past in the way they do when life is full and satisfying. Adelaide continued teaching, though she took occasional breaks when the babies came. Eventually, there were 4 children, Rose, James, and then twins Hannah and Henry born in 1885. The ranch house expanded to accommodate the growing family, with new bedrooms added and the porch extended to wrap around 2 sides of the building. Isaac's ranch became one of the most successful in the region. He had a reputation as a fair employer and a savvy businessman, and his cattle brought top prices at market. But he never lost sight of what mattered most: his family, the land he loved, the community that had embraced them. Adelaide became a fixture in Springerville, teaching multiple generations of children, serving on the town council, helping to establish a small library. She never forgot the courage it had taken to leave Boston, but she also never regretted it. This was where she belonged, in this high valley surrounded by mountains, with this man who had waited his whole life for her. One evening in the summer of 1890, Adelaide and Isaac sat on their porch watching the sunset while their children played in the yard. Rose, now 13, was teaching the younger ones to dance to music from the fiddle Isaac had given her. James, at 8, was serious and focused as he tried to copy his sister's steps. The 5-year-old twins, Hannah and Henry, tumbled around like puppies, more interested in wrestling than dancing. "Do you ever miss Boston?" Isaac asked, taking Adelaide's hand. Adelaide considered the question thoughtfully. "Sometimes I miss my family, though we correspond regularly and they have visited twice, but miss the life I left behind. No." That woman who stepped off the stagecoach 12 years ago was looking for something she could not name. She was looking for this. She gestured to the scene before them. The ranch bathed in golden light, the mountains rising in the distance, their children laughing and healthy. She was looking for home. "I am glad you found it." Isaac lifted her hand to his lips. "I am glad you found me. You told me once that you were waiting for me. I did not understand then how literally you meant it, how you had spent years turning down other women, holding on to some faith that the right person would come. That must have been lonely." "It was," Isaac admitted, "but it was worth it. Every lonely year, every moment of doubt, it was all worth it to find you, to build this life with you. I would wait 1,000 years if I knew you would be at the end of it." Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence, the solid strength that had been her anchor through 12 years of marriage. "You know what the funny thing is? I spent years in Boston insisting I did not need marriage, that I wanted to be independent and self-sufficient. I thought love was something that would limit me, trap me into a life I did not want. And now I understand that real love does not limit or trap. It expands everything. It makes you braver and stronger and more yourself than you ever could be alone. You have never once asked me to be less than I am. You have supported my teaching, valued my opinions, treated me as an equal partner. You have given me freedom within our marriage, not despite it." Isaac turned to look at her, his blue eyes warm with emotion. "That is because you are extraordinary, Adelaide. You are brilliant and brave, and you make me want to be better than I am. Loving you has been the great privilege of my life, and loving you has been mine." Adelaide kissed him softly, tasting 12 years of shared history, 4 children, countless moments of joy and struggle and triumph. "Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for being worth the wait." They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The children's laughter filled the air, mingling with the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Cattle lowing in the distance, horses moving in the corral, the wind rustling through the pine trees. Adelaide thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the cobblestone streets of Boston to this high valley in Arizona. She thought about the courage it had taken to leave everything familiar, to step into the unknown. She thought about the moment she had first seen Isaac, the way her heart had recognized something in him even before her mind caught up. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, attuned to her silence. "I am thinking about fate, about how things are meant to be. If Mrs. Henderson had not died, if the school board had hired someone else, if I had chosen to go to California or Oregon instead of Arizona, we might never have met. All the little decisions and chances that had to align perfectly for us to find each other." "Do you believe in fate?" Isaac asked curiously. "I did not used to. In Boston, I believed we made our own destinies through hard work and determination. But now," Adelaide smiled, "now I think maybe some things are meant to be. Maybe you really were waiting for me and I really was meant to come here and find you. Maybe love is not just chance or choice, but something written into the fabric of the universe. That is a romantic notion for someone who used to pride herself on practicality. You have made me a romantic, Isaac Sutton. You and this wild, beautiful place that has become my home. Rose finished her song, and the children came running up to the porch, demanding water and hugs. Adelaide and Isaac pulled their family close, answering questions and settling minor disputes, and dispensing affection with practiced ease. This was their life. Ordinary moments made extraordinary by love, the daily work of building something that would last. Later, after the children were tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Adelaide and Isaac lay together in the darkness, talking softly about the future. They discussed plans for the ranch, worries about the children, hopes for the years ahead. They talked about getting older, about eventually handing the ranch down to their children, about all the adventures still waiting for them. "I hope we have decades left together," Adelaide whispered. "I hope we get to see our children grown and married, to meet our grandchildren, to watch the world change around us. So do I." Isaac pulled her closer. "But even if we only had today, even if this was all we ever got, it would still have been worth waiting for. You would still be the answer to every prayer I was afraid to speak." "I love you," Adelaide said simply, the words carrying 12 years of meaning, of shared history and deep trust and abiding affection. "I love you too. Always have, always will." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that they had found what they were seeking, that the wait had led them exactly where they needed to be. The years continued their steady march forward. The children grew and thrived. Rose became a gifted musician, her fiddle playing sought after at every dance and celebration. James developed his father's love for ranching, spending every free moment learning about cattle and land management. Hannah proved to be a natural teacher, often helping Adelaide with the younger students. Henry, the baby of the family, despite being only minutes younger than his twin, combined his mother's intellectual curiosity with his father's physical courage in a combination that kept his parents both proud and perpetually worried. In 1895, when Adelaide was 42 and Isaac 49, they sat on the porch one evening much like that night 5 years earlier. But this time, Rose was 18 and preparing to attend the new territorial university in Tucson. James was 15 and already running much of the ranch operation. The twins were 10, balanced on the edge between childhood and adolescence. "Our baby is leaving," Adelaide said, watching Rose pack her trunk through the window. "When did she grow up? It feels like yesterday she was toddling around after the chickens." "Time moves faster than we expect," Isaac agreed. "But she will do well at university. She has your brains and your determination. She has your music and your heart." Adelaide leaned against Isaac's shoulder. "All our children are a blend of both of us, the best parts of what we have to offer. They will make their own marks on the world. We have given them roots and wings, as my mother used to say. Now we have to trust them to fly." Rose left for Tucson in September, and though Adelaide cried when the stagecoach pulled away, she was also proud. Her daughter was getting opportunities Adelaide herself had fought for, the chance to develop her mind and pursue her passions. It was everything Adelaide had hoped for when she first boarded a stagecoach heading west all those years ago. Life on the ranch continued its steady rhythms. The cattle business remained strong, though there were hard years when drought or harsh winters took their toll. Isaac, now approaching 50, still worked as hard as ever, though Adelaide noticed the gray creeping into his hair, the way he moved more carefully on cold mornings. She was not immune to age either. There were fine lines around her eyes, silver threads among the auburn in her hair, but she felt no sadness about aging. Every year with Isaac, every moment with their children was a gift she treasured. Adelaide continued teaching, though she reduced her schedule as the younger children needed less of her time, and she found herself wanting to be home more. She had taught 3 generations of Springerville children by now, watching the town grow from a rough frontier settlement into a proper community. The school had expanded into a larger building. The town had gotten a proper doctor's office, a newspaper, even a small hospital. The wild edges were slowly being tamed, though Adelaide thought the landscape itself would never be truly tame. In the spring of 1898, Rose returned home from university with a degree in music and a young man in tow. His name was William Peterson, the son of the rancher whose barn had hosted that first dance where Adelaide and Isaac had waltzed together. William was a good man, hardworking and kind, and it was clear he adored Rose. They married in June, a big celebration that brought together everyone who had watched Rose grow up. Adelaide stood at the church and watched her daughter marry, remembering her own wedding in this same building 18 years earlier. She felt the circle of life completing itself, the way each generation built on what came before. When Isaac took her hand during the ceremony, she squeezed tight, grateful for every moment that had led them here. James announced his engagement the following year to a sweet girl named Sarah, whose family owned the neighboring ranch to the south. The wedding was smaller than Rose's, but no less joyful. Watching James stand at the altar, Adelaide saw Isaac as he had been when they met, serious and steady, a man who would build something lasting. She knew Sarah was getting a good husband, just as she had. The twins, now in their middle teens, showed no signs of settling down, much to their parents' relief. Hannah declared her intention to become a teacher like her mother, while Henry talked endlessly about exploring beyond Arizona, about seeing the world. Adelaide and Isaac encouraged both dreams, knowing their children would find their own paths just as they had. In 1902, Rose made Adelaide and Isaac grandparents with the birth of a son named Isaac after his grandfather. Holding her grandson for the first time, Adelaide felt the overwhelming rush of love she had experienced with her own children, mixed with something new. The joy of seeing the family extend into another generation, the knowledge that what she and Isaac had built would continue beyond them. More grandchildren followed over the years. Rose and William had 4 children. James and Sarah had 3. Adelaide spent her 60s surrounded by grandchildren who climbed onto her lap demanding stories, who followed Isaac around the ranch learning everything he would teach them. The house that Isaac's father had built and Isaac had expanded became the center of a sprawling, noisy, loving family. Adelaide retired from teaching at 65, after 42 years in the classroom. The town threw her a retirement party that brought together former students from across the decades, men and women who credited Adelaide with giving them the education that changed their lives. She cried through most of the evening, overwhelmed by the evidence that her work had mattered, that she had made a difference in this community she had come to love. Isaac retired from active ranching around the same time, turning the operation over to James while remaining available for advice and guidance. He spent his days working in the garden, playing with his grandchildren, and sitting on the porch with Adelaide talking about the years behind them and the years still ahead. One evening in the summer of 1910, Adelaide and Isaac sat in their customary spots on the porch. They were both in their 70s now, their hair white, their bodies moving more slowly, but their love undimmed by the passage of time. The ranch was alive with activity, grandchildren playing, James discussing business with the ranch hands, Sarah and Rose preparing supper together in the kitchen. "Do you remember what you said to me that day by the creek?" Adelaide asked, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "When you asked me to marry you?" "I remember every word I have ever spoken to you," Isaac replied. "But which particular words are you thinking of?" "You said you were waiting for me, that you had turned down every other woman because you were waiting for something you could not name until I stepped off that stagecoach. I meant every word, still do. I was thinking today about all the women you could have married, all the lives you might have lived if you had not waited. And I was thinking about how grateful I am that you did wait, that you held onto that faith that the right person would come." Isaac reached for her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "I would wait 100 lifetimes for you, Adelaide. Every choice I ever made, every moment of loneliness I endured, it all led me to you. It all led us here, to this life we built together, to these children and grandchildren, to this love that has sustained me through 32 years of marriage." 32 years, Adelaide repeated wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together, like there was never a time when we were separate people. We were always meant to find each other. I believe that with everything I am." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade from the sky, listening to the sounds of family and ranch that had become the soundtrack of their lives. Adelaide thought about the young woman she had been when she arrived in Springerville, full of determination and fear and hope. She thought about how that woman had found not just a career or a home, but a love that transformed everything, a partnership that made her more than she ever could have been alone. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For waiting. For seeing me. For loving me exactly as I am. For giving me this beautiful life." Isaac lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Thank you for being worth the wait. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who did not know how to say what was in his heart. Thank you for every day, every moment, every breath we have shared. I love you, Isaac Sutton. I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you beyond the end. And I love you, Adelaide Sutton. Always have, always will." The stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had watched them fall in love, that had witnessed their wedding, that had shone down on every important moment of their lives together. Inside the house, someone started playing the fiddle, probably one of the grandchildren. The music drifted out through the open windows, mingling with laughter and conversation. Adelaide and Isaac stayed on the porch long after everyone else had gone to bed, holding hands and remembering, dreaming and planning, simply being together. They had built something remarkable, a family, a legacy, a love story that would be told by their descendants for generations to come. They had proven that waiting for the right person was not foolish but wise, that true love was worth any amount of patience and faith. As the moon rose over the mountains and the night deepened around them, Adelaide rested her head on Isaac's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. This was home. This had always been home. Not the building or the land, but this man, this love, this life they had created together out of courage and hope and an unshakable belief that they were meant to find each other. "What are you thinking?" Isaac murmured. "I am thinking about that schoolteacher who asked the cowboy why he never married and how he said he was waiting for her. I am thinking about how that simple truth changed everything, how it was the beginning of all of this. Best words I ever spoke, best words I ever heard." They sat together under the stars, two people who had found in each other the answer to every question that mattered, the fulfillment of every hope and dream. The wait had been long, but the reward had been worth it. They had found love, true and deep and lasting, and they had built a life around it that would endure long after they were gone. This was their story. The schoolteacher and the cowboy, the woman from Boston and the man who waited. Two people who took a chance on each other and discovered that sometimes the right love at the right time can transform everything. It was a story of patience and courage, of faith and determination, of a love that was worth waiting for. And as the years continued to unfold, as their grandchildren became parents themselves and the family tree spread ever wider, Adelaide and Isaac remained at the center of it all, the foundation on which everything else was built. They grew old together, their love deepening and strengthening with each passing year, proving that some things are truly meant to be, that some people are destined to find each other no matter how long the wait. They lived to see the new century take root and blossom. They lived to see automobiles replace horses on the streets of Springerville, to see electricity come to the town, to see the world change in ways they never could have imagined. But through all the changes, their love remained constant, an anchor in a shifting world. Isaac died peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1920, at the age of 84. He simply did not wake up one morning, his heart having given out after 8 decades of steady service. Adelaide held his hand as the realization dawned, as she understood that her partner of 42 years was gone. The grief was crushing, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. But even through the pain, Adelaide felt grateful. They had been given so much time, so many years of love and laughter and life together. She had held his hand through decades of joy and struggle. She had raised children and grandchildren with him. She had built a life that was rich and full and meaningful. The wait had been worth it, and so had every single day that followed. Adelaide lived for 5 more years, surrounded by her loving family but always missing the man who had completed her. She spent her final years in the ranch house they had made into a home, telling stories to great-grandchildren about the cowboy who had waited his whole life for the right woman, about the schoolteacher who had taken a chance on love in the Wild West. She died in the spring of 1925 at the age of 82, with her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed. Her last words were soft but clear. "Tell your grandfather I am coming. Tell him the wait is over." They buried her beside Isaac on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the wide Arizona sky they had both loved. The marker was simple: Adelaide Ellis Sutton, 1843–1925, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, teacher. But the true memorial was the family that gathered to mourn her, the dozens of descendants whose lives existed because a schoolteacher and a cowboy had found each other on a dusty street in Springerville in 1878. Their story became family legend, passed down through generations. The ranch stayed in the family, worked by James's children and their children after them. The love that Adelaide and Isaac built became the foundation on which everything else rested, proof that patience and faith and courage could create something that lasted beyond a single lifetime. In the end, it was a simple story. The new schoolteacher asked why the cowboy never married, and he said he was waiting for her. 3 decades of loneliness had led Isaac to one moment of recognition, to one woman who was worth every lonely year. And Adelaide, running from a life that did not fit, had found in Springerville, and in Isaac the home she never knew she was seeking. Together, they proved that true love is worth waiting for, that the right person at the right time can change everything, that some stories are meant to have happy endings. Their love story became a testament to the power of patience, the reward of faith, and the miracle of 2 hearts finding each other across time and distance and circumstance. It was, in every way, a love worth waiting for.